we're going to move on and talk about the other supervillain spinoff series, DC's The Penguin, which just premiered episode 5 on HBO. And we are more than halfway with the series now. Last week was sort of the halfway point, and now we are entering into the second half of The Penguin on HBO. So after episode 5, there's only 3 episodes left as well for this series. And so things are certainly heating up. A lot to get to on today's talk about the latest edition of The Penguin. Before we dive into spoilers and get into the nitty-gritty details, we'll just start with some general big picture thoughts. So what'd you think about the latest installment of HBO's The Penguin?
It was a good episode. I don't think it was as good as episode 4, but personally, I just really like that episode. It was going to be really hard to top that episode for me, but that is not saying this episode wasn't good. I think this episode was still really good. And a ton happened, like a lot really happened in this hour of TV that I can't wait to get to. But I think it was all still very well done. What I do like about this episode is we do hit more locations of Gotham. They're still exploring Gotham, and they're still showing us these different locations and what Gotham is supposed to feel like. I think as a setting, I think they're doing a good job of continuing to weave out, of course, intimate and familiar spaces, but also moving to different places to kind of flesh out what the city is supposed to look like. But I enjoyed it. Can't wait to get to it. Oz and Sophia are still, man, just going crazy on both sides. And what I do like about this episode is kind of like a flip between each. This is kind of like the fallout, what we see from episode 4 in a lot of ways. And we get to see kind of, I think 50% Sophia, 50% Oz, and how they're dealing with this thing. And I really love how the attention to how much screen time each character is getting. They very well could have been different. But I think they struck a really good balance here in this episode. So I enjoyed it. A lot to get to. But yeah, man, I think it was a really good episode still.
Yeah, it was solid. You know, they kind of had to reset the deck after last week's episode, which similar to what we just talked about with Agatha, it just changes the format and the formula of the show. It's becoming something different than what the first few episodes were. And so this was a reset to refocus our attention on our 2 primary leads now at this point, in Oz and of course Sophia Falcone. And I think that it was pretty effective in that. You know, there were certain scenes that weren't as interesting as others, but that's okay. You know, it was definitely, I think, one of those moments where it's like, okay, we're kind of shuffling the deck here, getting some pieces into play. We have to set up like what these final few episodes are going to be. And because Oz and Sophia are completely apart in this episode, and they have been for like a couple of weeks now, that's also one of the things that, you know, at times can be a bit of a weakness with the show, because they just have so much chemistry with each other. Like, I just want to see, I want to see Kristen Milioti and Oz like on screen together, like acting out different scenes. Like Colin Farrell and Kristen Milioti are just so good, but because they are separated and they're acting on opposite sides of their conflict against each other, that's just a byproduct of where the story is. But be that as it may, it was still a really, really solid episode of the series. Certainly provided a lot of depth to characters that will continue on and characters that have departed. And that's ultimately what you want to see. You just want to see things kind of go deeper and really understand like where everybody is at. So I was satisfied with it. I'm really ready and excited for the next 3. But let's talk about the details. This is your spoiler warning. If you've not seen episode 5 of The Penguin, watch it, check it out, and come back and finish out the rest of our conversation. As you pointed out, this episode is kind of split evenly amongst Oz and Sophia. So I want to talk about Sophia's sort of story beats in this episode first, and start off with kind of where things left off last week, which we saw her essentially take out the entire Falcone crime family, but she took out everybody except Johnny Vitti, you know, and that was one of the people that she left alive. And the question begs itself, well, why did she keep him alive? And ultimately we find out that she basically wants to know where this untraceable money is at that her father kept, and Johnny Vitti would essentially only be the person that would know the location of that cash, because Sophia is now off on her own. The Falcones are gone. She's trying to start her own new empire. And of course she needs resources and money to do so. But we see that she has Johnny Vitti tied up in a, you know, sort of locked up cellar. And this is the one moment where he kind of gets to really kind of explain who he is and why he's been the way that he's been in this show. And we kind of learn through this conversation between Sophia and Johnny that Isabella Gigante, Sophia's mother, is actually Johnny Vitti's cousin. And basically the night that she died, she was actually planning to leave Carmine Falcone. And we know that Carmine ultimately killed her. And Johnny was actually waiting to pick her up down the street, and she didn't show. But once he found out that Carmine killed her and he really couldn't do anything about it, and Carmine, of course, has a daughter in Sophia, who in Johnny's eyes represents really everything that's wrong with his family. She's just a constant reminder of Carmine's insanity and almost his
Hmm.
psychotic behavior. He has this huge resentment towards her, which kind of adds all of the context that we need to better understand like why he was a part of this betrayal, why he sided with
Yeah.
the Falcons essentially to send Sophia off to Arkham for all of those years, knowing that she was innocent. And so, definitely a lot that had to be unpacked and explored there, and we needed that for his character, knowing that he got killed later in the episode. But what did you think about that? Just adding, those different layers to Johnny Vitti, sort of making him a little bit more relatable, I guess, in his actions and his feelings towards Sophia. But also on the other side of that, Sophia is just like, fuck all of that noise. I don't want to hear any of that right now. Like it's too little too late for me to care about any of
Hmm.
that stuff because of everything that's already led up until this moment.
Yeah, and the way he treated her, just in general, it's like, how am I supposed to really listen to completely everything you're saying? But I do like that they added color to Johnny Vitti because of multiple reasons. One, he doesn't have the Falcone last name, which in my mind is another reason. Sophia was like, okay, give me a second. Like you can also be the person that I need to get some information that's not a Falcone. maybe you'll tell me some truth, not being a Falcone. Because you learn later again, she gets rid of pretty much all Falcones to eventually get rid of the name. But also, it was just nice, I think, to hear Johnny Vitti's side of things because he is such one of the biggest important characters that is left after. And it's like, okay, why are you here? Where were you during Carmine's reign with Sophia's mom and all that stuff going down? And when Carmine was trying to throw Sophia in jail, like what was Johnny Vitti doing and what was his psyche and how did he feel? And so I like that we took a moment to get in there for him to explain himself, and I guess to just come a conclusion of what kind of side he was on in this whole thing. So yeah, I think I just like hearing his mind and what he thought. Kind of simple as that. But also Sophia need that money because the whole operation, you know what I mean. She got to restructure some things, and she's gonna need a different kind of start. So yeah, I thought it made sense, and I thought it was a good way kind of to start the episode.
Yeah, and honestly, we needed this moment out of the Johnny Vitti character because all the way up until this point, like I didn't really have much of a reason to care about him at all. He was just kind of
Hmm.
there, and like, I know he's not somebody to be trusted. I know he's not good, but um, I was a little disappointed at the underusage of the character, just because like there was clearly more there that we just weren't necessarily privy to it really until this episode. And Michael Kelly, who plays him, is a really terrific actor, and he's been in a lot of
Yes.
great TV series, particularly House of Cards. And it's like, this guy is super capable. I just want to see more out
Hmm.
of him. So we did need this moment to happen, and I'm glad that it did. But it's also one of those things because like we're working within just like 8 episodes, and as of now, there's no plans to continue the series, which I don't think that's going to hold for long. I think we're going to get more, but they have to speed run through a lot of these things that we can't spend a little bit more time on because there could have been even more flashbacks if you think about it, like just showcasing Johnny Vitti and how he acted towards a young Sophia Falcone. Maybe some of those moments where he resented her and brushed her off and neglected her and didn't really pay her any mind, or see more of the relationship between him and his cousin, Carmine's wife, Sophia's mother. Like there could have been a lot more there, but there's only so much time that we have within the show, obviously. But this moment, sort of coalesces into Sophia. She does trace down the cash. She strikes it big, and she's ready to take upon the mantle of being the head of the not the Falcone family anymore. Now the Gigante family. She is
Yeah.
taking on the maiden name of her mother. She is shedding herself of that identity completely and calling themselves and renaming themselves the Gigantes. And that's a really big pivotal moment for the character as well, just considering obviously her very, very toxic and dysfunctional relationship with her father, but also her really just establishing her own name and identity and starting anew and starting something fresh and different. And before long, they're at the head of the table. They're having a meeting. She's basically staking her claim. Johnny Vitti, he questioned her at one moment in time. She
Mm.
blows his brains out just, instantly like that, just reinforcing that she is not somebody to be fucked with. And also Johnny
Yeah.
Vitti, like, this just, again, I don't care about you. I just needed this money. And now you are disposable. You acted out of turn, you spoke out of turn, so you got to go. But yeah, I think that this really strikes fear into a lot of people's hearts and eyes because she's just not she's not playing around anymore. So how did you feel about just that whole sequence? Obviously a lot goes down, and they sort of go back and forth between like her developments and just also like how she ultimately assumes this power. But the Gigantes, I think, is kind of the biggest takeaway from this, just the fact that again she is like shedding that former identity and just starting something that's completely different, completely fresh, and completely her own.
Yeah, I kind of like that idea, having a new crime boss, family. She restructured the hell out of that thing. She changed the name. This ain't a merger. You know what I'm saying? She cut it down from the ground. It's like we rebuilding something completely different. But I really like the thought, because when you know Sophia, you know what she's been through and how she felt about her mother and the learnings about her mother and everything. It's like it would make sense that you do not mess with this Falcone name anymore. Like you really don't. I can imagine maybe if Alberto was still around, maybe she would, keep it for the sake of her brother. But because he's dead and she killed everybody else, I don't need this name no more. This name is corrupt and put me in Arkham Asylum for 10 years. We need a new name that's going to be living out my mom's name. I thought that was a really cool, I think, just restructure for her to do. I thought that was, like you said, like a rebirth of a character. I thought that was pretty cool to see. And you could even see it in Chintani when the rebirth was almost like the yellow dress she had on. It's like, oh, it's really time to get to it. And what I also like about what she's doing, even in this episode, when she's wearing the black dress and with the fur, she always makes sure that you can see her scars. You know what I mean? Like she drops down her dress so you can see her scar. And like I really like small details like that she gives to us, because it's like, I don't know, it's just different from what the Falcons had going on. She always comes with a message, and I think that's really cool. And Johnny Viti just had to say something, bro. There's like two minds here. One part of me thinks Sophia knew he was gonna say something crazy and was like just wanted to shoot him so everybody would have, like, you know what I mean, make an example of him. There's another part of me that actually believes she wasn't gonna shoot him, but he just had to say something. Like, you were just tied up in the basement, bro. Like, why would you say anything at all? I'm not saying one word. I'm just gonna sit there and chew my food. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not gonna say anything. He had to say something and got whopped immediately. Just that's the shit that Sophia is running now. But yeah, I really like those scenes. I thought it was really cool towards what the rebirth of Sophia was supposed to look like with the new Gigante family.
Yeah, Mans needed to learn his place. I don't know what he was thinking in that moment. He
Like
got
what?
way ahead of himself. But yeah, this was really cool, and I just like that they keep continuing to like make this Sophia Falcone distinctive and different than anything we've seen
For
before. We
sure.
talked a lot about the interpretation and sort of the redesign of the character based on what we previously saw in like comics and other media compared to what we're seeing
Mm-hmm.
now. This just like furthers that and takes it to another level. And the idea of like a different crime family, because the Falcones and the Maronis, like those are just so strongly associated with Batman lore. Like now that we're getting into the Gigantes, that's something that hasn't been explored as much, and so I really like that they're going that route. We should also mention Dr. Rush, Julian Rush, who comes back. We had questions about
Yeah.
him, her therapist, in Arkham. Basically, he's madly in love with her. That's ultimately, where it all lands. We had questions like, what is that relationship? Is it romantic? Is it intimate? Like, what is it? He basically shows back up and he's like, I will do whatever you want. I am here for you. I am in service of you. No questions asked. And that kind of puts a bow on that. I don't know where that's going to take their relationship, but any thoughts you want to say on that? Because I know that was just like one of the lingering things that we kind of wondered about, since she was staying with him in present day,
Mm-hmm.
outside of Arkham, but didn't know how deep that love ran. But now it certainly appears that he is just answering to whatever she's willing to do and ask.
Yeah, that boy is off the hinges. I did not expect to see him come in there and just like, gravitate towards all the violence and the things that Sophia has been doing recently. He's like, I know it was you. I know what you did. And Loki, he's like, I love it. And I'm like, what? Is that how we got? I thought you were supposed to be the North Star out here as her therapist, and you are not that at all. You're only doubling down on the bad things that she's doing here. But man, I'm still trying to figure out. I still think there's something there. He doesn't feel like Scarecrow anymore. He's starting to feel more like Hugo Strange every day. Again, he could be his own character or anything like that. Not completely like off the hinges in terms of analysis or who this character could be, but he's starting to feel like some Hugo Strange here. So we'll still have to see. But I think his character is becoming more interesting by the day. We'll see where he continues the rest of the series.
It's kind of interesting too, because this is almost like, and the timing of this is funny, but it's almost like the inverse of what we see with Harley Quinn and Joker. Like this
Yeah, you're right.
therapist, this doctor who becomes very infatuated and sort of enamored by this criminal lifestyle. You know, they
Hmm.
become just like a stan almost, and become very consumed by it, and they're willing to participate, which is a whole
Yeah.
different level entirely. So I found that really interesting,
Hmm.
but I'm curious to see like where his character lands. Let's talk about Oz and everything that happens with him in this episode. Similar to Sophia having a very, very violent moment in this episode, a ruthless moment. Basically, Oz has, I think, a mirror image of that on the other side of things, and his side of the episode is much more chaotic, much more disheveled. Like it's not as put together as what we see with Sophia. He's trying to make things happen, but things are all over the place, and he's hiding out his mother, and he's trying to patch up things with Eve. It's just a lot going on with him. But essentially, Oz in this episode, he's bribed a prison guard to assassinate Maroney, and basically he captures Taj, who is Sal and Nadia's son, and he's basically threatening to kill him, in exchange for information, and obviously exchange for their support in this episode. Nadia confronts him in a parking garage, and basically Oz kills them outright. He sets fire to a tied up Taj, and also a Nadia who tries to save Taj from being set ablaze, but she's not able to do so in time, and quickly just it all just really really spirals quickly, and Oz watches in pure fascination. Like he's almost pleased with his work in that moment. The fact that he's just completely eliminated them and he's watching them burn alive. It's a really sadistic and really twisted scene, but I think it kind of completes the transformation of him just being a flat out villain. Like this probably could be
Hmm.
a guy that we used to root for in the beginning of the series. He just had ambitions. He seemed like an underdog. He didn't want people to look down on him. But now it's like, okay, burning people alive, as evil and as criminal as they may be, that's kind of far, my guy. That's a line I don't know how many people are willing to cross. But he again, he's very much pleased by his work. But what did you think of that whole sequence? Because it was a pretty shocking turn of events to see Nadia and Taj go out that way.
Yeah, it was just a dark scene overall, and even think how Nadia in that moment, it almost felt like she knew she was going to die, because the way she embraces Taj, because for a second, Taj is walking towards her, and you can tell that he is soaking wet with gas. And, of course, if you're looking at that from first point of view, you might not think necessarily it's gas, but there is a moment I feel like Nadia is like, I feel like she could have just pushed him away and ran up the steps or something, but I feel like she knew that was it for her. And would you rather go out getting shot or kind of hold? I would have tried to get out, but she was like, she kind of just embraced her son and was like, we're gonna go out like this together. And they got set on fire, and that was it. But to see the way Oz looked at them was like, that was everything. I was like, whoa. You, like you said, he's pleased by his work. He there was something in his eyes that definitely enjoyed what was happening. His eyes were almost really smiling in some ways, and so it was kind of crazy to see. I think Penguin go to that level, and now more and more, if any kind of kill is calculated, I feel like his face, you can kind of tell in his face what that looks like. Even in from the very beginning, killing Alberto, I was thinking like, maybe he was making some faces at Alberto too, like in terms of like, dang, yeah, I really just killed this dude who was talking shit on me. You know what I'm saying? And here we are in this episode with this whole ordeal. It's like, dude, you are really twisted at times, and like you said, this is really turning him to this is like the stamp of like, no, y'all, this dude is a villain. And I think villains can stay villains, and there are moments where you can feel bad for them, because there is a moment right after this you're like, dang, I still feel bad for you, but no, you're a villain, bro. You know what I'm saying? I think it's a very interesting thing in the way in which they're playing this. But yeah, I think it makes sense again, especially after last episode, after making Sophia again feel like somewhat of a protagonist a little bit. I'm like, yeah, this dude is they're both off the hinges. So I don't know what's about to happen or what's going on, but I love that there is still like such a big push and pull between these two, and kind of their descent and ascent to madness. It's interesting.
Yeah, that sense that they both have like a bit of a bloodlust. I think
Yeah.
in different ways, but obviously very similar pathways. I mean, at certain times they were both outcasts and looked down upon and not treated rightly or fairly by the people around them, and so they have retaliated in extremely violent ways. I mean, what Sophia did last week with the gasoline, the to kill everybody in
Hmm.
their sleep, it's like that's a really terrifying thing, because she didn't have to make a sound at all to do so, to
None.
just like commit such a huge high profile level of violence. And then with this one, it's obviously a bit of a stark contrast to see some people burning alive. That's very loud and
Mm-hmm.
super aggressive. But the more intimate look into his eyes and his facial features and his expressions in that moment just kind of tells the story of, I think, where these two characters are. You know, they're at this place where it's like, yeah, heads are going to roll at any cost if anybody betrays me, or even in the sense that, like, this is just one more way for me to get one up on somebody. Because I think Oz really did this um, to kind of get a head on Sal. You know, he kind of
Mm-hmm.
used this to hold this over Sal's head, because when Sal calls him after he's broken out of prison, he's like, yeah, why don't you give a call to your wife and see how she's doing? It's almost like he waited to say that. Like, he's been
Yeah.
waiting and eager to say
Mm-hmm.
something like that to Sal, knowing that he would have this this really, really heinous act that he could just hold over his head and sort of taunt him with. And so yeah, it's all pretty dark stuff when you think about it at that level. But speaking of that, you know, Sal does break out of prison. Oz tried to orchestrate an assassination attempt. It ultimately does not work, and Sal does get out of prison ultimately. And in the midst of this, again, because Oz is just, you know, all over the place, he finds this information out, and so he has to essentially enlist Victor to go hide his mother. You know, he's very worried for his mother's safety, and so Victor takes his mother to a different apartment. So we get a whole little side story with that. Meanwhile, Oz is trying to patch up and really settle things with Eve and utilize her to try to figure out things and ultimately keep things in motion. But at a certain point, Eve is just like, enough is enough. Like, I'm not doing this anymore, because now you're putting me in danger. You're putting my girls in danger, you know, the people that I
Mm-hmm.
work with, because she remembers everything that happened in the club a couple of episodes ago. And now she's starting to see like how dangerous this all really is. Like, we're dealing with high level crime lords and crime bosses. And she also knows about Sophia. And she knows that Sophia is also like an unhinged motherfucker. Like, you don't want to play with these people. And so Eve is like, I'm good. I'm out. We're not doing this anymore. And so that
Mm-hmm.
person that Oz trusted, you know, which is one of the few, is no longer by his side. And that just like ultimately really boils over when he thinks that the last person he can really trust, which is his mother, she also
Mm-hmm.
rejects him in that moment when he tries to lay down. She's just like, yeah, no, you don't even know how to take care of me. So I'm not going to respect you. I'm not going to hold you. I'm not going to, you know, make you feel better in this moment because you can't even take care of me. And so everything that Oz has built is starting to somewhat crumble around him. So what did you make of just like all of those sequences, like from Eve's sort of detachment from Oz, what his mother reacted to, just everything really kind of coming apart at the seams for him?
Yeah, it's so interesting how when Oz is going through anything, I think major in his life, he constantly and continuously turns to the women in his life. In some ways, that's all he has, but also that's where he seeks, I think, somewhat some kind of validation. And when he goes to Eve's crib and you know Eve kind of rejects him, like, I know I'm not going with you. He has a temper tantrum. You know, he starts throwing stuff, and what's interesting in that scene for me is how calm and collected Eve is. You know, we're up until this point, in some ways, when we see Eve and Oz together, we're made to believe that Oz being around, he's always, I think, a little more of like a teddy bear, like cuddly. Like, I'm thinking, like, you know, how you would think a real penguin is. Penguins look super cute, but they can also be hella dangerous. You know what I'm saying? If you know what a penguin is, penguins can be hella dangerous. And so she seemed like she was so used to Oz doing this stuff. She didn't move. He's breaking glasses, and she's just kind of looking like, "Yep, this is Oz," you know. And I think that's really interesting and telling of Oz as a character in a way that we technically haven't seen him before. We hadn't seen him throwing stuff against the wall. We've seen him angry for sure, but not like he was in that moment. And when he doesn't get that validation for Eve, he goes back to the source, right? And it's so interesting because you know when Oz is talking to Vic about his mom, he's like, she keeps me alive. And I'm like, oh my God, something bad's going to happen. I thought something, to be honest, in this episode, I thought this was it. Every episode, we don't know when his mom was going to go out and when she's going to die. But when he said that, I was like, this might be it. And so it was really interesting getting into that scene with his mom. I'm like, oh my God, he's going to touch her and she's going to be dead. And that's not the case. But instead, in some ways, this is super devastating to hear of like, get off me. You can't take care of me. It's like, dang, you don't. First, I said validation from, again, the first layer. Let me go to the source. And now she's rejecting me too. I know that was a gut punch to Oz and everything that he's trying to do. Because in some ways he is doing his best. You know what I mean? And so it's I know it's a really hard thing to hear, but I know that also hearing that sent him into another different kind of spiral because he's seeking approval, of course, for other reasons, but for his mom and the women in his life, he feel like he really needs that. So now he's off to do something else crazy in order to again earn the trust of his mom back and maybe the trust of Eve back. It's a really interesting place to be in for Oz.
Yeah, in the midst of talking about all of this, like the really dark, tragic, heinous shit that both Oz and Sophia have done in this episode and previous episodes, I still can't help but feel like some empathy for them and just like
Yeah.
some of that sense that like, wow, this is like a really tragic story for them both, especially Oz in this case too,
Hmm.
because they're at two different places now. They have been moving parallel in some extents, but Oz is, I think, at his lowest point, and now we see that Sophia has kind of ascended to her highest point, her highest power. And that's really telling for what the last three episodes are going to be. Because let's not forget, I think maybe Sophia is probably the most well fleshed out character in this show, and she's
Hmm.
certainly stolen the spotlight in a lot of different points and instances. But the show is still called The Penguin at the end of the
Exactly.
day, right? And so the deck is stacked against Oz because all the people that were by his side are no longer there, except Victor. Victor's the only one who stuck around. He's kind of committed, and we get the sequence at the end where they find like a new headquarters. It was almost like his own bat cave, I guess, like
Hmm.
him going down
Yeah.
and establishing this new base of operations. But on the other side of things, as we wrap up, our conversation with this episode, we get an exchange with Sophia and Sal Maroni, who is sort of grieving the death of Nadia, his wife, and basically Sophia extends him an offer that it looks like he probably can't refuse, and that's an alliance. Let's team up together to kill Oz because he's now done something for against you that is unforgivable. He's done plenty of things against me that's unforgivable. We both have a
Hmm.
common enemy here. And so let's team up together, form a new family, a new alliance, and team up and take out this guy and rule Gotham's criminal underworld with an iron fist. And so, what do you make of that moment, that decision, and obviously how it's going to sort of influence the next few episodes and where that puts Oz? Because again, I think the deck is now stacked against him, and so now we have just a few episodes left to see how he's gonna, I guess, weasel his way out of the situation.
Man, Sophia is so smart, man. In so many different ways and reasons. But and here again, she comes up to Sal and's like, two things. One, I know how terrible the Carmines have done you in the past and this whole war thing. Look, I wasn't even a part of that. They put me in jail. There's a new regime. You technically ain't got no beef with me. Not only that, but Sal, we learn, is this guy who is kind of a good boss. You know what I mean? Like, my people get health care. My people, like, they be chilling. I pay them good. In a lot of ways, it's like we could just work together. Like the beef that you have with all the people are dead. Now we both got beef with Oz. Let's just team up. I think she's so smart and so collected and calculated and in so many different ways. Like, she knew coming into that house, I feel like how it was kind of going to go down. And she just does a good job at, I think, getting her way in such subtle ways. But yeah, Oz has a lot stacked against him now. After this, and he should be very afraid for what's going to happen. You mentioned it. That now with this new alliance, Sal and more importantly Sophia, they at the top of the game. They're only growing from here, and Oz is trying to grow, but he, like you said, he has hit a super low point. He ain't got no drugs. He got two things of mushrooms to go off of. He has a lot of work to do, and so it's going to be interesting to see. It's pretty much Sophia's control versus Penguin and Oz's chaos, and which one is going to be the victor by the end of it. Like you said, the TV show is called Penguin, so obviously, or it feels like something is going to happen to Sophia, but I think getting there and find out how and what and where, that's what keeps the show interesting. And I can't wait to see how it goes down.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's a lot that he has to put together in a very short time frame. Like, he has no support, no men, no backup, like you said, no drugs. He just found a place to operate out of with Victor. That's a good start. But he's going to have to put a lot together if we are to assume that by the end of this he's actually the one on top. How is he gonna ultimately win this war? This
Mm-hmm.
huge massive crime boss battle against Sal Maroni and of course Sophia Falcone. So certainly can't wait to see how it all plays out. But folks, those are all of our thoughts on the fifth episode of the HBO and DC original series, The Penguin. If you've checked this out, definitely hit us up and let us know what you think.